Hello friends and welcome. Have you ever looked in the mirror as you were going out the door and realized your foundation was making you look older and not better? Well, I dare say that's happened to all of us at one time or another. So today I want to share with you the 12 best foundation tips to help you look your absolute best. But before I do, I want to say welcome to any of you who might have stopped by here for the first time, and welcome back those of you who are already part of this family. If you're looking for makeup tips, techniques, and products that are the best choices and make the biggest difference for those of us over 50, you have come to the right place, because that's exactly what this channel is all about. And from time to time, we also touch on fashion and wellness tips as well. So if you enjoy what you see today, please join our wonderful family of subscribers before you leave. All right, let's get to today's topic, the foundation tips that can help us look our absolute best. A research study that was done in Germany not that long ago found that there's one makeup product more than any other that can make the biggest difference in how we look. In fact, the study concluded that this one product can actually help us look 5 to 10 years younger. And yes, you guessed it. It's a product that evens out our skin tone, which is exactly what foundation is designed to do. But as we all know, we can run into all kinds of issues with foundation. It can look cakey, it can look too shiny, or make us look sallow or ashy, and any number of other things. So today, we're going to cover the top 12 foundation tips that do make the biggest difference in how we look. Tip number 1 is a tip I know from personal experience makes a huge difference, and that is skin prep, which involves cleansing and moisturizing, and also priming the face if you're someone who does like to use a face primer. Cleansing and moisturizing amount to creating a surface that helps your foundation glide on. And the reason I know this is so important is that I once got distracted before doing one of these videos and forgot to moisturize. So when I applied my foundation on camera, I could not understand why I was literally having to tug at my face to apply my foundation. And then the light bulb went on, and I realized that I had totally forgotten to moisturize. Lesson learned the hard way. So applying a good amount of foundation, especially if you have dry skin, as many of us do, is crucially important. And even if we have oily skin, the right moisturizer designed specifically for oily skin can also make a big difference. So my routine is, after I cleanse my skin using my Tatcha rice wash, I then apply my 3 timeless serums, moisturize with my Clinique Dramatically Different Moisturizer, and then apply my Eve Pearl Primer, which is called her Priming Moisturizer Treatment. And I'm going to go ahead and do all these steps quickly. This is my Timeless Vitamin C with ferulic acid and vitamin E, and I first apply that. This is a brightener. And this is an acid, so you don't want to get it around your eye area. And if I have any left over, I like to put it on the back of my hands. Next, I apply 4 drops of my coenzyme Q10. And these products have made a huge difference for me in reducing the amount of redness on my face. And my last serum is Matrixyl Synthese 6. So it may seem like a lot of work, but the actual routine, when you get it down, goes very quickly. And it's certainly worth doing considering the results. Then I let that soak in and totally dry, and then apply my moisturizer. And I'll be using Clinique's Dramatically Different. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this moisturizer. It's been around for a very long time, and there's good reason for it. It really is a cult favorite. It just feels so good, and it really absorbs into the skin well. And I think you can really see the difference in the moisture on my face. And then before applying makeup, I will always use my Eve Pearl Primer. She calls this her Priming Moisturizer Treatment, and Eve Pearl is a makeup artist who has won a number of Emmy Awards and really does fantastic work. And you only need a little bit. And this is also moisturizing, which is one of the things I really love about it, because I have very dry skin, and especially in the dry climate I live in, I really need even more moisturizer. Tip number 2 is one I think we've all struggled with, and that's finding the right foundation shade. It's very important to find a foundation shade that is meant for our skin's undertone. So if we have a warm undertone, we need to be sure to find a foundation that also has a warm undertone. And if we have a cool undertone, we need to go with a foundation that also has a cool undertone. And same if we have a neutral undertone. We want to find a foundation with a neutral undertone. The good news now is that most foundations have a C, W, or N on the bottom or back of the foundation, and that stands for cool, warm, or neutral, so we can more easily find a shade that has the exact right undertone for us. A warm foundation has more yellow pigment, a cool foundation has more of a reddish-pink pigment, and a neutral foundation has an equal mix of warm and cool. Here are some photos that show cool, warm, and neutral foundation shades. And if you're not sure of the undertone of your skin, be sure to check out the video that I've linked below in the description box, which will walk you through the 9 questions you need to answer to determine the undertone of your skin. And in the description box below, I'll also include a link to all the products that I'll be mentioning today. So once we know our undertone, how do we find the right foundation shade? Well, that's where tip number 3 comes in. The best way is to get color matched at a department store makeup counter or Sephora, where a consultant can help you test out various shades on your face and neck. But unfortunately, as we all know, if we're looking for a drugstore foundation, we pretty much have to guess if it's the right color for us by looking at the bottle and the name of the shade. But there are 2 online sites that can be a huge help. One is called Foundation.com and the other is on the Sephora website. On the Foundation.com site, you enter a brand of a foundation or concealer that you know is a good match for your skin. And then you enter the specific shade of that foundation or concealer. So, for instance, if I know that NARS has a foundation that's a great match for me, I enter in the brand NARS. When different NARS foundations pop up, I pick the specific foundation that I have, such as NARS Light Reflecting Foundation. And then I pick the shade in that particular foundation that's a good match for me. Then a huge list of foundations will pop up from other brands and will be a good match for me. And for even better results, we can add a second brand after adding in the first brand. On the Sephora site, we can go to the foundation we're interested in purchasing, click on Find Your Shade, which is under the different colored swatches of the foundation, and then a shade recommendation will pop up. Now, unfortunately, this process isn't always perfect, but it can certainly provide a great deal of help. Tip number 4 is to not give up on a foundation after only one try. Now, I know it's tempting to simply put that foundation aside after the first test, and I've certainly wanted to do that too. But sometimes a foundation can look very different if it's applied in a different way. So before you throw in the towel with a foundation, try applying it all 3 ways, with your fingers, with a brush, and with a makeup sponge. Some foundations definitely look better based on the tool that we use to apply it. For instance, applying foundation with a makeup sponge can make a foundation look flawless, but it can also shear that foundation out. So that foundation might look better applied with a brush that would provide slightly more coverage. And speaking of application methods, let's move on to tip number 5. If a foundation is thinner, for instance, if it runs down your hand like this one that I'm going to show you, this is Tarte's C Hydroflex foundation. Another foundation that I have that's pretty thin that also runs down my hand is one from ColourPop. This is ColourPop's Pretty Fresh foundation, and it's not as thin as the first foundation I shared with you, but it definitely is thinner than most of my other foundations. So if you do have a thin foundation like this, first try applying it with a brush. That's because a brush will apply slightly more coverage than will a sponge. So I have 2 drops of the Pretty Fresh foundation, and I'm going to blend in one with my sponge and then one with the brush. Now, I don't know how well this is going to show up, but this is the foundation I blended in with the brush, and this is the foundation I blended in with a sponge, and the sponge application is much sheerer than the other one. Applying that foundation with a sponge means that there's dampness on the sponge that shears out the foundation, and the sponge also absorbs some of the foundation so it doesn't provide as much coverage. Tip number 6 is related. Different brushes we use to apply the foundation can apply it in a different manner. A softer, rounder brush, like this one, covers a larger area and spreads out the foundation so there's less coverage, especially if you use a round buffing motion like this one. A denser, flatter foundation brush like this one provides great coverage since it doesn't spread out the foundation as much. And if you use a patting or a stippling motion with this flatter, denser brush, you'll push in the foundation rather than spreading it out, which translates to greater coverage. So this would be a stippling motion, where I would just pat it in, rather than this kind of motion. And what if our foundation is too thick or too thin? Well, that dilemma is covered with tip number 7. If our foundation is too thick, we can simply add a little moisturizer to thin it out, which turns the foundation into a tinted moisturizer. On the other hand, if it's too thin, simply add a concealer in a similar shade to give some added thickness to the product. Tip number 8 is a solution for a foundation that's not quite the right match. And we all have been there too. It's either too light or too dark. I always recommend having on hand a 1 shade lighter and a 1 shade deeper drugstore foundation that can be mixed in to either lighten or darken the foundation that's not quite the right shade for us. That way we can customize our foundation and create our perfect shade. Next, how do we determine what the best foundation formula is for us? This is where tip number 9 comes in. Here is a guiding principle on this question. If you have oily skin, usually a matte foundation will be your best choice. For those of us with combination skin, a satin, which is also called a natural foundation, will be our best option. And for those of us with dry skin, a dewy formula will usually be our best choice. But if we have oily skin and we're a mattifying primer that helps keep the oil from shining through, we can often wear a satin or natural formula if we have oily skin. Some dewy formulas could work on oily skin, but usually that's not the case. Now, what if you have a matte foundation you absolutely love, but your skin's gotten drier and a matte foundation is no longer as flattering as it once was? And that's where tip number 10 comes to the rescue. Simply add a drop or two of a glowier foundation or a face oil to a matte foundation to give it a dewier look. So I'm going to demonstrate this with my Wet n Wild matte foundation. So here is my matte foundation. Underneath, I've mixed the matte foundation with the dewy version of this foundation, and you can see it looks much more dewy. And then here again is the matte foundation, and underneath, I've mixed the matte foundation with an oil, and you can see how much more glow it has. The oil I mixed in with the matte foundation is True Botanicals Radiance Oil. Tip number 11 also solves a problem most of us have dealt with at one time or another: how to keep our foundation or concealer from creasing. If we use a face primer first before applying foundation and it doesn't work, then try applying an eye primer to areas of your face where your foundation tends to crease. That eye primer can really work. And who among us has not looked in the mirror and seen a cakey looking foundation face looking back at us? Well, probably not many of us. What usually causes a cakey look is applying too much foundation. So tip number 12 is this one. Be sure to apply a small amount first, blend it in, and then add just a little bit more to areas that need it. I hope you found today's video helpful, and if so, please tap that thumbs up icon to let the YouTube algorithm know. And I hope in the comment section below you'll share either your greatest foundation frustration or a tip you use that makes your foundation look flawless. And if you'd like more makeup tips and product ideas, as well as some fun short articles to read, I think you'd really enjoy my weekly newsletter. Just drop me a line at boomerandbeyondbeauty@gmail.com to let me know you'd like to receive the newsletter each Thursday, and I'll make sure it arrives in your email box. Until we see each other again, I wish you good health and happiness and hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. Take care.